Nice. Well, we always love having you, Nancy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
My name is Lizzie Moffitt, and I'm the founder of this group. I started out teaching for 15 years. I did elementary music for 12 of those. And then the last 3 during COVID, I switched over to 3rd grade. Let's see here. I started this group because I found myself in a networking group similar to this one, but it was just for all entrepreneurs. And I just, by luck of the draw, ended up in a breakout room with all former teachers. And as we started talking, the discussion topics were around finances. And I realized that all of us former teachers had the same mindset issues and we all had the same frustrations. And I was like, why isn't there a place where other people in the same boat can meet and talk about those things? So I just made one. My vision for this group is for it to stay free for as long as possible and for it to be a really low commitment, drop in when you can, but to have really high caliber speakers and to have some really great conversations around those. Speaking of really great speakers, I've got a great one for you today. So let me go ahead and read your bio, and then if you're ready to start pulling up your slides, Elizabeth, go for it. So Elizabeth Williams is a mortgage lender and home loan strategist with Elevations Credit Union. She's been lending since 2005, helping thousands of people buy and refinance their homes. As a proud Colorado native growing up in North Denver metro community, Colorado has a special place in Elizabeth's heart. She's been fortunate to travel to all 50 states and is starting to cross off some countries on her list too. But every time she lands back in Colorado, she gets to confirm that this is home. She's thrilled to have the privilege of helping families put their roots down in this special state, but she really loves helping them understand how those roots help lead to stability and wealth building. One might say Elizabeth is a bit obsessed with games, using gamification techniques to build long-lasting habits, even creating a board game, Prosperity Through Property, which helps people understand how wealth is built through real estate and how buying even just one house has the power to change lives. Gamification is such a passion of Elizabeth that she's enthusiastic about sharing her strategies for using games to create habits that will stick and make crushing your goals even more enjoyable. I got to hear this presentation, or at least a flavor of it, about a year ago, and it absolutely reshaped how I looked at my 2024. And I can point to things and be like, this is from Elizabeth. I did this, and here's how it affected my year. So I hope that this is as useful for you as the last time I heard it was for me. And that, there, take it away.
I love that. And you know what, when we do breakouts, I would love for you to share like those ways that you've used it, because I feel like some people can really benefit from that too. So I got permission from Lizzie. I actually have a 4th game that I'm going to share with you guys today, because I really wanted to be able to share it. And so I asked her special permission to go a little bit over my time. So bear with me, guys, but hopefully everything in here is going to be juicy and worthwhile. So I'm going to start with a quick story, if that's okay with you guys. I would love you to picture a wee little Elizabeth, let's say maybe around 7 to 9 years old. This little Elizabeth was painfully shy and a little bit awkward. As an introvert, making friends didn't come naturally, and we moved around a lot, so keeping friends was also difficult. As an only child, it also meant that I didn't even have any siblings to play with, so this meant that I hung out with the adults in my life a lot. Can you picture it? Little Elizabeth sitting at the breakfast table with her newspaper and coffee. Well, maybe Sunday comics and milk, but you get the idea. It really meant that I learned to play games that most kids had no interest in. There's only so much Go Fish that most adults can play, as I'm sure you all can attest to. And so my mom taught me to play games that she also enjoyed. I think I played my first game of cribbage when I was just 7 years old. Has anybody ever played cribbage? Okay, so you know most 7-year-olds have absolutely no interest in this very math-heavy game, but I took what I could get. So, and she also didn't hold back just because I was cute and in pigtails. Oh no. She was ruthless. And so this gave me a great love of games and maybe just a little bit of a competitive spirit, both of which have led me here today to share with you these ideas that I have. So I am going to give you, if I can get my thing to move forward, let's see here. We're going to get all the technology issues out of the way right now. So I'm going to give you 4 real tangible ideas that you can use in your business or life right away. And I'm going to give you a couple of bonus ideas as well. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that you are not likely to resonate with everything that I talk to you about today, and that's okay. I give you permission upfront to take only that which serves you and leave the rest behind. None of this is meant to overwhelm or give you more shoulds in your life. I'm sure you all have plenty of those. But what do I mean by gamifying? So gamification is the act of adding games or game-like elements to encourage participation. So for example, if you're a runner and you're training to run a marathon, which I can't relate to because it seems highly unlikely I would ever do such a thing, you might have a competition with a friend, egging each other on to see who can do better. But I really want to talk about games as it relates to habits. And personally, I can't talk about habits without talking about Atomic Habits by James Clear. Who here has read this book? Okay, lots of hands on that one. I love it. This is one of my favorites. It's actually one of the few books that I've reread several times, and every time I do, I get new nuggets out of it. But for anybody that's not read the book, anybody that's read it but maybe needs a refresher, or anybody that has absolutely no interest in ever reading it, I'm going to attempt to oversimplify a complex subject that James Clear took 270 pages to explain. Habits are built in a loop. First, you have the cue, then the craving, the response, and the reward. He says the cue triggers a craving, which motivates a response, which provides a reward, which satisfies the craving, and ultimately becomes associated with the cue. Together, these four steps form a neurological feedback loop: cue, craving, response, reward, cue, craving, response, reward, that ultimately allows you to create automatic habits. This cycle is known as the habit loop. That's a lot of fancy words though, so I think it's best explained with an example. One of my goals is to have 50 conversations every week, or as I refer to them, live interviews. And as I was building this goal with consistency, I used one of the techniques that's referenced in the book. If you've read the book, you may be familiar with the paperclip idea. I had 3 cups on my desk. The first was filled with 50 paper clips. The second was my day cup, and the third was my week cup. As I'd have a conversation, I'd move a paper clip from the first cup to the day cup. At the end of the day, I'd count how many paper clips I'd moved or how many conversations I'd had, and I'd move them to the week cup. It was so weirdly satisfying to see how I'd done, and as I poured those paper clips onto my desk, it would cause me to want to do better the next week. So the cue, the cup was on my desk. The craving, I wanted to move that silly paper clip for some weird reason. The response, the actual having of the conversation, and the reward, the movement of the paper clip, which would drive the cue all over again. So now that we know how habits are built, let's talk about our first game. We know that one of the core foundations of good entrepreneurship is building relationships. And one of the ways that I try to solidify a budding relationship is by sending a thank you note after every face-to-face meeting. Does anybody do that consistently right now? Yes, of course you do, Lizzie. I love it. All right. Does anybody want to do just a little bit better at that? I love it. Okay. I attribute my consistency to this particular game. The morning following a face-to-face meeting, I do all the things that most of us are doing or want to be doing consistently. I add the person to my database. I friend them on the socials. I write them a personal note. I do a little coloring. Yep, I color. Here are some of my coloring sheets, and you can see it started with dogs because if humans deserve dogs, you deserve to buy a house you love. But I didn't want my cat lovers to feel left out, so I also have cat coloring sheets. And these are tools that I will be happy to provide to all of you if you are interested, completely free of charge, no strings attached. And so here's how it works. The morning following a face-to-face meeting, I get to color in one of my dogs, which is the reward for the face-to-face meeting. Here's the kicker though, and why it works. I only get to color in my dog once I've done all the things that I've set out to do. I've added the person to my database, I've friended them on the socials, I've written them a personal note. If I miss just one of those activities, I don't get to color in my dog. This causes me to crave the completion and make sure that I follow through on all my activities. Once I've colored in my sheet or my dog, I flip the sheet over and I write the name of the person next on the back. And this is another opportunity for me to identify the people that I'm connecting with and make sure that they're the people I want to be connecting with. It's important to me that I see my top power partners at least once a quarter, and this is how I ensure that I've done that. If I reach the bottom of the sheet and they're not on there, I know that they need to be on the next, they need to be a priority on the next sheet. This is also, when I reach the bottom, it's also an opportunity or a trigger for me to review my database. We've all been in those situations where it's been entirely too long since you've updated your database and some urgent need requires you to drop everything and do it right away. So this allows you to do it in more bite-sized chunks, making it much more manageable. Now, I am the kind of sick person that really loves a good database scrub, but if you don't, I encourage you to give yourself a reward for doing that hard work, or you might be less likely to follow through. So for my rule followers, here are those rules, and feel free to take a snip if you'd like. But all of these, once I provide you the tools, I'll also give you the rules for them as well. So first, connect, have that meeting, the fun part. Add the person to your database, write them a personal note, do all the things that you think are appropriate following a face-to-face meeting. Really quick tangent, just because you add somebody to your database doesn't mean that they've consented to you selling to them. So be careful what you do with the information in your database. I just put them in my database so I can keep track of them, send them birthday cards, that kind of stuff. Color in your animal or add I have another idea that I forgot was on this spreadsheet or on this presentation. If you're not a colorer and you don't want to color, I actually think that Lego can be another great tool to use for this. If you love Legos, you can use those as like what you would do with your coloring your sheet. Just adding a brick for each activity that you do that kind of drives you forward. And as you see the completion of your project, it can be really fun. So color in your animal or complete your Lego, write the name of the person or mark a tally if you've already seen them. And then when the sheet is complete, review, make updates and adjust for the next cycle, and then reward yourself for making those updates, as I mentioned, and consider a possible milestone to celebrate, which we'll talk more about later. So moving on to game number 2, which is for my data nerds. Has anybody read the 12-week year? Okay, a couple people. There are, this is my go-to recommendation for anybody that is looking to create goals or get better at tracking them. But there are 2 things in the 12-week year that I want to highlight today. First, that breaking your goals into quarters instead of annual goals will allow you to either build momentum or start over fresh. And second, the tracking your lead measures is more effective than tracking your lag measures. Now, your lead measures are the activities that you do that get you to your lag measures, if you're not familiar with that terminology. So for example, if you have an income goal, that would be a lag measure, but the number of phone calls you may know that you need to do in order to get to that income goal is a lead measure. So in order for me to track my lead measures and build on work I've done previously, I built this spreadsheet. Do I have any spreadsheet lovers in the room? I love it. Let's be friends. All right, so this spreadsheet, for those of you that are not spreadsheet lovers, may look really overwhelming, but I'm going to explain it. This spreadsheet allows me to keep track of the activities I want to be doing and how I've actually done. At the beginning of the quarter, I identify the activities that are going to move the needle in my business, like the aforementioned 50 live interviews and how many of each I want to do. So throughout the week, I keep track of how I've done, and the beauty and why it's gamified is the color changes automatically in the percentage from red to blue to green. Red being I'm below my expectations, blue being I've met my expectations, and green being I've exceeded my expectations. That way, at a glance, I can identify where I've fallen short and make adjustments accordingly. Now, a quick note, and anybody with a keen eye may have already caught on to this, 100% is actually above my expectations. While it is amazing when I reach 100%, I'm focusing more on ongoing growth and not so focused on getting a perfect score. As a recovering perfectionist, this distinction was important to me. Next, each activity also has a weight assigned to it. The weight is determined based on either how important it is, like face-to-face meetings, or how much I'm struggling to do them, like social media posts. Things like my personal notes, I've built strong habits around, so they have a lower weight. They're still vital to my business though, so I keep them on here to make sure that I am keeping them top of mind. The weight helps me establish what my score should be. Now the score in this example is 120, and when I reach my score, it changes automatically from red to green. If I'm reaching my score with consistency, I consider increasing it to push myself. One benefit of the scorecard model is that it does allow you to celebrate those weeks when you've had a really productive week, but you haven't necessarily reached every activity with perfection. One downside to the scorecard model, though, is that it does make it a little bit easier to avoid those activities that you've been avoiding anyway, which is why those activities that are more difficult for me have a higher weight because it hurts worse. So here are those rules. Identify your lead measures or your activities. Assign a point value based on importance. As you complete your activities, track them. Score them at the end of the week. Consider a possible negative consequence if you fall below a threshold. And then create a threshold or milestone to celebrate when you reach, which we'll talk more about later. But I'm going to take a quick tangent and take us on talk about negative consequences. Because the thing is that I would love to be the person that's only motivated by the positive, but the reality of the situation is that I'm not, and I suspect that many of you here are not either. Unfortunately, it's true that sometimes the stick can be more effective than the carrot. And I'd love to tell another story to illustrate this point. A while back, I was working with a coach and accountability partner, and she encouraged me to have a negative consequence associated with my activities. I was skeptical, unconvinced, convinced I was the kind of person that was only motivated by the positive, but I'm also a people pleaser and a good coachee, so I agreed to try it on for size. Together, we decided that 85% would be an appropriate threshold. If I didn't reach at least 85% or higher in my activities, I was going to pay my nemesis $500. Now, I say nemesis, and I know full well that I am not a superhero. And to the best of my knowledge, he's not a supervillain, but you know the kind of person that's in your life that you just don't jive with? They're the black to your white, the night to your day, the oil getting all mucked up in your water. This guy was all of that, plus he consistently produced better numbers than me. And as I may have mentioned, I might be just a teensy tiny bit competitive. So I think it goes without saying that I did not want to pay him $500. He had no idea I had agreed to do this, but my coach did, and she was going to make sure that I followed through with it. And unfortunately, I found out then that negative consequences can be very effective because I never reached the level of the level in my activities until that cycle, and it actually changed the trajectory of my business. So sometimes you employ what you have available to you. But moving on to game number 3. So this is the new game that Lizzie hasn't had a chance to see yet. Game number 3 is actually in its little fledgling state. And I like to start by talking about Duolingo and Snapchat. Is anybody familiar with these two apps? Okay, does anybody have a guess? And feel free to come off of mute if you have a guess. What commonalities do they have? Why do you think I reference these two apps together? No guesses?
Something about streaks would be my guess.
Oh, I love it. Sarah, you got it. Yep, it's about streaks. There are some of the best that I know of about encouraging streaks. My kids are obsessed with both these apps because they have encouraged them to have streaks. Has anybody ever played that game where you hit the balloon or the ball back and forth and you see how long you can keep it off the ground? Yeah. So there's something very powerful about that idea of doing just a little bit better than you did the time before. And it's one of the things that I think of that is a tool that online games and apps use to keep us hooked. So why not use it in our own lives or businesses? I kind of think of it as a compound effect when you're building a streak. And I have to just go on a quick tangent when I think about compound effect. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Warren Buffett. One thing that I learned recently is that Warren Buffett is as rich as he is, not just because he's a good and savvy investor, which we all know that he is, but also because he has simply had more time. Apparently, he started investing when he was just 11 years old. And now that he's 94, he's been investing consistently for 83 years. First of all, doing anything consistently for 83 years is going to make you pretty dang good at it. But beyond that, if you take away the time before the average investor started and you take away the time after the average investor stops, he's not really all that different than the average investor. He's just had the benefit of compounding effect. And so I think to myself, compounding effect, streaks, how do we implement this in our business? And I created this very primitive streak tracker. So this streak tracker allows me to keep track of streaks as I'm doing them. Right now, I'm working to do 4 consistent weeks every weekday of a morning routine. I know that if I show up doing my morning routine, I show up better. But when I show up consistently over an extended period of time, it's even more effective. So I'm trying to do 4 weeks every day doing my morning routine. It's much harder than you think, especially when their holidays are in there. But I will tell you that on day 7, when it's negative 10 degrees outside and I really don't want to get out of bed, having a streak that's keeping me, encouraging me to get out of bed, it's pretty effective. However, on day 18, let's say, if something happens and I'm not able to follow through with my streak, that could be pretty discouraging. So there's going to be 2 things that I'm going to do if that happens. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself grace. These things are going to happen. It's okay. It would be amazing if I reach my streak, but if I don't, it's okay. I'm going to move on. The second thing I'm going to do is more advice from the very clever James Clear. I am going to commit to never missing more than one day at a time. These things are going to happen. I'm going to fall off. I'm not going to do it perfectly every single time. But if I commit to getting right back on day 2, then that is way more effective than allowing myself that excuse day 2, day 3, and then before you know it, you have a streak or a compounding effect in the wrong direction. So this is the spreadsheet, or this is the worksheet that I will be happy to share with you guys so that you can use it yourself, but it's pretty simple. You just are keeping track of your last streak, your next streak, and of course, the reward that you're going to give yourself when you reach your streak. But here are these official rules. Identify the activity you'd like to track and complete. Determine what streak you're striving for and put that in next streak. If you've already been doing this and you have a last streak, complete that as well. Identify a reward and build on rewards as you make progress. And the one beauty of that is that when I get to 4 weeks, it's easy enough for me to add to 5 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever that may be. Whereas I don't have to start from scratch. I just get to build on that. And there's a beauty in that. And then make a commitment, as I mentioned, to never miss more than one day at a time and consider a possible negative consequence if you do. But moving on to game number 4. Has anybody randomly read this book, Level Up Your Life? Okay, Lizzie would have been the only one I would have thought of might have read it because she's heard this talk before. But if you like this idea of gamification, you might enjoy this book. He dives deeper into this concept, especially as it relates to fitness. But there's one idea that he references in his book that I want to highlight today. He has this idea of levels in your life. I've translated it into what I think it would look like if you had levels in a business. Level 1 may be to find your first client. Level 2 may be to get paid for the first time. Level 10 may be to make $100,000 in a year. It doesn't really matter whether you're on level 3 or level 30 in this example. The idea is to be excited about that next achievement, that next milestone. So when I was introduced to this concept in a completely different book, a seed was planted. And that seed got watered and grew into my 4th game, Milestone Bingo. I created a bingo card that allows me to celebrate my achievements and milestones as I reach them. Some of them are things that I have control over, like how many phone calls I make, and others I don't, like maybe how much income I make. In other words, lead and lag measures. I know that if I'm doing the things that drive the needle in my business, the rest will follow. So it's important to me to have a balance on this bingo card. When I reach an achievement or milestone, I mark it off on my bingo card. And here's the part where the magic happens. I celebrate. When I get a bingo, I celebrate with something big that breaks the pattern. This allows me to celebrate the small things while I'm waiting for the bigger things to happen. Now, a quick note, not all of your achievements or milestones are going to give you money directly as a result of them, especially if you're tracking lead measures over lag measures. So it's important to me that I mention, because I'm a big fan of fiscal responsibility, that not all of your celebrations need to actually cost money. I love to create an ongoing list of things that I reference when it's time. And as I think of new and fun ways, I add them. That's part of the fun, is to think of ways to celebrate. One of my favorites is to take an afternoon off and go for a hike. I've also been known to do a Sunday spa day at home. But when I get a bingo, because it takes 4 or 5 achievements, I do celebrate with something big that breaks the pattern. And that does usually cost money. I love to buy something I wouldn't buy otherwise. And it gives me that little dopamine kick, that little boost of confidence when I use it or put it on, knowing that I've done something worthy of celebrating. So here are and this is a Canva template, happy to share this one as well. But these are the rules. So brainstorm your achievements, milestones, and accomplishments. I like to do a brain dump into a Word document of all the things that I can think of that might be an achievement or a milestone. And if you don't have enough to fill up a bingo card, don't stress. Feel free to reuse anything that you want to reuse. For example, I have new referral from a repeat client, or I have a referral from a third referral from a power partner. These kinds of things can be repeated. And so feel free to repeat them if you need to. And then at random, assign goals to bingo squares, focusing on a balance of activities and achievements. So one of the things that I do is that same brain dump, I just number them, and then I go into a random number generator and I just allow it to assign them, randomly. That way you make sure you're not setting it up for success or cheating, as the case may be. Review regularly and mark off achievements. I love to do this first thing in the morning on Mondays, and that has a secondary benefit of basically acting almost as a second vision board for me. It reminds me of the things that I'm striving for and reminds me of the things that I'm looking to do, and acts as something that I have to focus on throughout the week. And when you reach a milestone, like I said, celebrate. And when you get a bingo, celebrate with something big that breaks the pattern. So those are my 4 games, but I do have one last game that that Lizzie briefly mentioned in my bio. I have a game that, oh, we're gonna do breakout questions. This is not the breakout questions, that's different breakout questions. But I do have one last game that I was gonna highlight. This is an actual physical board game, and it's called Prosperity Through Property. And my next game night is gonna be March 4th. So for those of you that are local here to Colorado, I would love to have you. But basically, it's a physical board game that I like to describe as the game of life meets Candyland. And you go around the board and you get to buy real estate and sell real estate. And it gives you an opportunity to understand a little bit of a deeper nuance on how building wealth through real estate actually works. So I would love to invite you if that is something that you would be open to. And I have this QR code for you to tell me how I can support you. So every single tool that I have provided here, I am happy to give you free of cost. I won't add you to my database and spam you, I promise. I'm really just looking for opportunities to rise those tide. A rising tide raises all ships, as they say. And so I'm looking for opportunities to give back to my community. And so if any of these tools are going to benefit you, this is just a quick Google form for you to let me know how I can support you. And I'll be happy to send all of the tools, including the lovely spreadsheet, coloring sheets, Canva template, and the streak checker. And I think that's it.